Okay. Just picking back up, Dad has gone and found the book that he was referring to, and it's called Kriege.
Yeah.
Kriegie, and it was written by
Oscar G. Richard III.
All right. And you were referring to that, talking about what went on in the negotiations between the German command and the Allied prison command at the time that the prison was being that area was being overrun by the Russians, and I guess they were having a transfer of power.
Yeah.
But it made me think of another question. You keep referring to the senior officers in this prison. Who was the senior officer in that prison?
I don't know who the senior officer. There was one, but I don't remember how he. I don't know what his authority was. But each compound, there were 4 compounds.
Oh, okay.
Each compound also had a senior officer, but I guess the senior officer of the camp, and he may be mentioned in here. I don't remember, but the guy we had who was the senior officer of our compound was he was an American ace combat pilot.
Fighter pilot?
Fighter pilot. His name was John something. It's in here, I'm sure.
What was your rank?
First lieutenant. I'd been a first lieutenant about a month.
Okay.
And they joked about, how did you get your bar? Did you change bars on the way down in your parachute?
Then at some point, the senior command of the prisoners made contact with the Russians, and how did they go about deciding how, where, and what people would do with themselves who were prisoners up until this point?
Well, up to the point where the contact was made with the Russian officers, it was just to sit still.
All right.
Don't do anything. The gates will be open, but you're not to. I don't think they made it very emphatic that we couldn't go down and visit this little town, because that went on. People go down there and find something to drink and a party going on, but that went on until about 2 days had passed by, and then that all got stopped. There was an order not to go into Barth at all, and to just sit and wait like we were told. Well, the day that maybe the second day after the American senior officers contacted the Russian general, the Russians still were insisting that we march out, all almost 10,000 of us, to just hit the road.
They didn't care where?
They wanted us to go west.
Okay.
Well, it turned out that the American lines were probably, or British and American lines were probably 100 miles or more away. So
quite a march.
Yeah, our officer said there's no way that we could do that with this many people. We'd run out of food. We'd be in. It'd just be. So anyway, they invited the general to come out, the Russian general to come out and see the camp and meet the men. So they came out to one side of the compounds were in a kind of an L shape, the 4 of them, 2 up here and 2 down here. And they brought the Russian general and his cohorts in on one side of the fence, and the American colonel got up on something and yelled some speech to us about who this was, and told the Russian apparently that if he was concerned about our being there and being behind fence so that they couldn't get at us if they wanted to, that we'd tear the fence down. So that's what the Russian wanted, and we Our officers told us to take the fence down. Well, it was it was about 10 feet high. Anyway, it was one of these things you didn't think anybody could get close enough to tear down. It was down in 10 minutes, all around the place. And
how much of that was enthusiasm, and how much of that was just it was poorly constructed?
Well, I think it was all enthusiasm, but it may have been more poorly constructed than we had thought. But it was laid down.
And so you had the fence down. There was no reason for the Russian army to keep as apprehensive about these prisoners that were there. So what happened next?
They told us within a day, the American senior officers told us that they'd made contact with the Allies in the West, and that B-17s were going to come into the local airfield and pick us up.
Okay.
As long as it took, they'd be sending in planes.
How did they make contact?
I don't know.
Okay. All right.
It may say in this book. I don't remember. But they told us just to sit tight, and beginning with about day 3 or 4, people began to head west. I don't think very many did, but on the 5th day, my buddy and I decided we just couldn't stay there any longer, and we got up before not after daylight, but before most everybody else was awake, and he and 2 other guys, we headed west. On foot.
Okay.
We had some crude maps that were generated by the officers in our prison camp, so that if anything did happen, that we'd at least know where we are and what routes to take to get away.
Okay.
So we used them to go west.
Now you're headed west, and what do you know of as far as enemy combatants between you and this Allied front 100 miles away?
We just know that there's a Russian front that's
ahead of
us.
So you're following in their wake, or that's the plan?
We were probably 2 days at least behind them, and nothing was really stopping them. The Germans were running out in front of them and trying to surrender to the British and American allies.
What did you see was happening to the German prisoners, German people that were surrendering? Were they being just taken in as prisoners of war? Were they being slaughtered?
Oh, by the Russians?
Yeah.
They were being slaughtered.
And what evidence did you see of that?
One in particular I remember was that there was a German major that was dead and lying in a battlefield that we walked across going toward the Allied lines. But there were dead horses. The Germans still employed a lot of horse-drawn stuff. So we saw a lot of dead horses, a lot of wrecked military horse-drawn vehicles. We ran across, we kind of mingled with the German civilians that lived along this road we were on, and asked them how they were getting along. And there were a lot of tales of suicides. And
now we use the word slaughter. Are we talking about military combat slaughter? Are we talking about murder? What are we?
Well, we're talking about primarily combat slaughter.
Okay.
We saw a lot of. I can't say that I saw any German soldiers except that one, but we got a whole lot of talk.
Yeah.
That they'd been quite brutal in coming through.
So, as the German prisoners were surrendering, they weren't being taken prisoner?
I don't know. We didn't see any of them. I get the idea that the Germans are running faster than the Russians.
So there's 4 of you traveling on foot, is that
Yeah.
correct? And you stayed together?
We stayed together for about a half a day.
Oh,
The other 2 guys were tall and were wanting to walk faster than we could keep up. So when a Russian vehicle, an officer vehicle, you know, they look like a convertible
uh-huh,
with the front and the back seat and all.
right. Sedan?
One of them, yeah, sedan, but no top. So there were 2 officers, 2 German officers came along. 2 Russian officers came along and to offer us a ride. And the 2 tall guys said, give these 2 short guys a ride. So they didn't have room for all of us. So we got to ride to Rostock with them, which was the next city of any importance.
And this was all in the course of the first day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did they speak English?
The Russians?
The Russians, not much. You know, we conversed with the Russians mostly in what little bit of German that we knew. They did know German. But
Talk German to each other.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, could you hit pause just a second? Could y'all hit pause?
Okay, we're going to continue on, but before we do, Dad says that we need to back up and talk about something he referred to in the early on in the prison war camp relating to a man who had been captured by the Gestapo.
This was an American fighter pilot who'd been flying, I believe, a P-51, got shot down and got with the underground and almost got out. I mentioned that earlier, but he was caught and turned over to the Gestapo, and he had a badly injured leg, and when that healed and finished healing in the prison camp, he told us only so much of his story, it turned out, and after the Russians came through, he told us the rest. He had become engaged to be married to this French girl that was in the underground, and he was scared to death all the time he was in the prison camp that he would find out that she was killed by the Gestapo. So he went to France when we got released. He took the ride by B-17 to France, and then he went to northern France and went to the residence where the girl
I hate to have been the tape.
where this girl came from. Found out she was still alive,
And
and they got married.
oh, really? Well, that's a happy story. Now, what is his name?
Russell Moriarty.
And where was he? Do you know where he was from?
He was from New Jersey. He said he lived at the foot of the Washington Bridge in New Jersey,
And
coming out of New York City.
so he flew. He was on one of these rescue B-17s, flew him, and he found this woman, found where she lived, went to her house. She was there.
He found her.
He found her, and then they got married. How shortly? Within.
Well, I don't know. I just found out that he got back to France. He found her, and they were going to be married.
How did you know this? How did you find?
I got it through we'll get there in a little while, but we were actually wound up at a prisoner of war holding camp in France, on the coast of France, called Lucky Strike.
Okay, we'll go back to Rostock. Is that the name of the town?
Yeah, Rostock.
And talk about getting there that night, and we'll work our way up to that.
All right. We got as far as Rostock with these Russian officers, and they took us to about the middle of town to a park. It was still on the same road we were staying on, going west across North Germany. And they let us out at a park, and we went over into the park, and we all were carrying,